Hi there everyone. Today I'm going to make a meatloaf. I haven't made a meatloaf in a while. So today I'm going to make a meatloaf in an iron skillet instead of the traditional loaf pan. So it does seem to make a difference in an iron skillet. It just seems to have a heartier flavor to it, baked in iron. So I hope you enjoy this recipe. These are the ingredients I use for my meatloaf. I don't always make it exactly the same. I do change it up sometimes, but today I have a little over a pound of ground beef. I'm using about 3/4 a cup of oatmeal. Sometimes I use crackers and sometimes I use oatmeal. I'm going to use probably a half a cup between a little ketchup and a little barbecue sauce combined, and only about a half a cup. I'm going to use 1 egg. I'm going to use some garlic, probably half a teaspoon. And I'm going to put a little olive oil around the edges of my skillet just so the meatloaf doesn't stick. And then I'm going to use a third of a onion and like a half a shallot and 1 egg, and salt and pepper. It's going to be normally about a half of an onion, but since I'm combining shallots and onions, I'm doing like a third of an onion and a half a shallot. So these are what I'm using today. You want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Then we're going to chop up our onions and shallots. And you can use shallots if you want, or you can just use onions. I'll put my hamburger meat in our bowl before I do anything else. And then what I do is I salt and pepper my meat first. I just want to let you see something here. Here's 1 spoon, here's another spoon, and here's like a little teaspoon, and then I have these 2. So if you ever see me salt or sugar something and you think I'm over salting or putting way too much sugar on it, I'm usually using this little spoon, and it might look like I'm putting a lot more on it than I actually am, and sometimes I use this little spoon. So just to let you know, the majority of time that I'm salting stuff with the spoon, it's this little one here. So I'm going to take my smallest one. This is kosher salt, and I'm going to kind of go over this. I'm going to turn it over. And anytime you cook meat, you do salt it more than as if you're having something that isn't cooked, because it absorbs the salt much more when you're cooking it. So I do salt and pepper the meat before I do anything. And even though this is going to have some garlic, instead of fresh garlic, I am going to be using minced garlic. And I'm putting a little of this little spoon of it in. And I still put a little bit of garlic powder, not much. And then I'm going to add my egg. And like I said earlier, you're going to have like between a half a cup of barbecue sauce and ketchup. And I'm not going to measure, but that's about approximately how much I use. Just kind of like this. And I pour a little bit of, I would say a half a cup at the most. And then I'm going to put 3/4 of a cup of oatmeal. But before I do that, I'm going to add my onions and shallots. And this is a consistency based on just how you want it. So you're going to just mix everything with your hands, and it will kind of show you how you want it, like what's the consistency. So you can't really make a meatloaf without using your hands, and which is fine. So the ketchup and the barbecue sauce has salt in it as well. So it's going to be really well flavored with both of them. I might add a little more oatmeal. And like, it's just kind of like I gave you round numbers, because anywhere from 3/4 of a cup to a cup of a filler, which could be crackers or oatmeal. I'm going to add probably another 1/4 cup of oatmeal just to give it a little more of a filler. So that's pretty much it for blending everything together. I put just about the amounts I want of everything in it. So now we're going to put it in our skillet or your loaf pan. whichever you choose to do, but this recipe today is going to be done with the iron skillet. So you're just going to smash everything down to each edge. It's going to go all the way to the edge. And I'm going to bake this for at least an hour on 350 because it has the egg in it and everything. It's not going to cook fast like a regular hamburger would cook. So this is going in a 350-degree oven. We're starting with an hour, and then we're going to take a toothpick or a knife and press it in and see. You can tell if it's cooked or not. And then after that, I'm going to put a little bit of barbecue sauce on it. You could put ketchup. I'm going to put a little barbecue. I'm just going to brush it. I'm not going to put a bunch because I don't want it to stick to the skillet. And then I'll put it back in for 10 or 15 minutes. So put it on the middle rack. So I'm going to make some fried potatoes to go with this meatloaf. My mom always made scallop potatoes, but somehow I don't think they come out that well for me. I don't know why. So I'm just going to make some fried potatoes, and I'm going to put some cooked shallots and some a red pepper that needs to be used. And if you have an onion, you can use onion too. I want to use this shallot and the rest of this red bell pepper that I don't want to go to waste. So you can cut these potatoes any way you want. And I don't always cut them the same way, but I don't want them to be too thick or too thin because I don't want potato chips and then I don't want them too thick. So I kind of cut them like this. And it doesn't matter if they're square or round, any way you want. Just like this. And then cut them the other way. So these are going to be like fried, like kind of between sauteed and fried in the pan, kind of on low, a medium low, so to speak. So it doesn't matter. Just something like this, about this size. And I'm making this just for me. So I really don't need more than one potato, but I'm going to anyway because I've already peeled it. So kind of like how I'm doing right now. They almost look like large wedge French fries, but it doesn't matter. Any way, just like this, just as long as they're not too thick and not too thin. So about like this. And then as soon as I'm done chopping these up, I'm going to salt and pepper them. And that's all I'm going to put on them is a little salt and pepper. And I might, while they're cooking, towards the end, I might sprinkle a little bit of garlic powder on them. So I'm going to use the second to the last smallest spoon. It was my daughter that brought this to my attention. She says, "You're putting way too much salt on your food." And I said, "No, that spoon isn't as big as it looks. This is the second to the, there was a smaller spoon than this." So when I told her which spoon I was using, she was kind of more relieved. She thought I was putting way too much salt on my food. So now we're going to put this in my other iron skillet. I'm going to put some beef tallow in here. And you could use lard, you could use olive oil, shortening, whatever you want to use. But I got some of this beef tallow probably a month ago. My son's used it. This is the first time I've ever used it. So it has a high heat tolerance, and so that's why I decided to use this just to try it out instead of using olive oil. I'm not making French fries, but I'm still going to try it out. So I'm going to start with my vegetables, the peppers and onions, and I'm going to saute these probably about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to add my potatoes. And I'm not going to fry the potatoes. I'm going to kind of cook them at a lower temp, kind of saute cook, but not fried. I did saute this or cook it longer than I had planned to, but it's okay. I'm going to move it to some paper towels. And as soon as I move these all out, I'm going to add a little more grease, beef tallow, and I'm going to cook my potatoes separately, and then when the potatoes are done, I mix everything back together. So my burner is only on a 2, and yet you can see it how hot it is. I'm going to put my potatoes in. And they're already seasoned, so I'm just going to kind of stir them around. And I'm going to let them cook for probably about 15 minutes. And if I want them to cook a little faster, I can put a lid on them and turn them down, and so they steam more, and put a tad bit of water. But I'm just going to let them cook like this. So you poke a fork in and they're cooked. Now we're going to add the vegetables back. Here's our finished meatloaf, and there's always shrinkage, and you can see here there's probably an inch of shrinkage all around, and when you poke it in, it's done. You can see it's done. So what I'm going to do now is just put a little bit of, maybe 2 tablespoons of barbecue sauce, and I'm just going to cover it up with this a little. And you know what? I'm not even going to put it back in the oven. You don't have to, because this meatloaf is just thoroughly cooked, and I really don't want to cook it anymore, and I just want to leave a little bit of a sauce on the top where it's not dry. So now we're ready to try this. Okay, it's time to taste this. This took exactly 1 hour to cook in my oven. So you could see it was just a little over a pound, and that's how long it took. And if you could cook 2 pounds of meat in that same skillet, and it will take a lot longer. So let's taste it. Really good. The barbecue sauce and the ketchup that's inside of it really gives it a lot more moisture and flavor, but yet it's cooked all the way through. The potatoes are good. They're not mushy and they're not hard. So everything's really good. So if you want to try this meatloaf in a skillet, it's really, really easy, and none of it stuck to the pan. I was concerned about some of the barbecue sauce getting on the edge, but I decided not to put it back in. I decided to just brush it, and it doesn't need to cook again. So I hope you give this a try, and I hope it turns out wonderful.